Well, this is awkward. This was supposed to be where I do my review of Pokemon Sun and Moon and use the experience gained from playing those games to get a better grasp of where Pokemon as a franchise is right now and where it seems to be headed. Unfortunately, despite contacting Nintendo in mid-August with a request to review the games in advance of their release, I got an email back a few weeks ago saying that they'd run out of copies to give out. So, yeah, that's convenient. Never mind, I'm sure Pokemon Sun and Moon didn't do anything to change the formula. Oh wait, they changed so much. After a shaky few years for Nintendo, 2016 turned out to be a pretty useful one, and that's in part thanks to Pokemon celebrating its 20th anniversary in some style. Wasn't really anything drastic, just release a phone app that appeals to the universally held desire to get up and catch Pokemon, and hype the ever-loving shit out of your next big game. All of a sudden, the world reacquainted themselves with the wonderful world of Pocket Monsters. Old fans returned to see that the series has moved on pretty nicely without them, and long-term supporters were given a sign that the series was moving in the right direction. I can't really think of another gaming franchise in a better position than Pokemon. But is it just a stopgap? Is this the rise before the fall? Could this really be the end of all things Pokemon? Let's see if we can't work that out. I don't want to talk too much about the influence of Sun and Moon because Game Freak decided not to ship copies of the game to Europe until today, so I can only speak from what I've read in reviews. But still, there was a demo, I kinda know what's going on. I think the biggest takeaway from Sun and Moon is that the series isn't as resistant to change as first thought. Understandably, you can grasp why a lot of people throw shade at Pokemon games for being the same basic adventure reheated every couple of years on a new console, and with a few weird looking monsters thrown in. Obviously, the new additions introduced each generation helped to make each new installment feel at least a little bit unique. And yet, despite introducing small nuggets of innovation, it has never been an indication of what features will be used in the future. Gen 2 had a radio, Gen 3 had the Fame Checker, Gen 4 had the PokéNav, Gen 5 had the Pokemon World Tournament and difficulty settings, Gen 6 had fucking roller skates. Who's to say that all the new features introduced in Sun and Moon won't be forgotten just as quickly when it comes to making a new game? Really, it's up to Game Freak to decide what should be kept, but I don't think they should be making a habit of taking things out. Yes, it keeps everything fresh, but it removes the chance to improve these features. I mean, they're tiny things, so it ultimately doesn't matter, but who knows how much of a clean slate Game Freak want for future Pokemon games. It's worked so far, so why stop? Will the next generation have Pokeride instead of HMs? Oh god, I hope so. A lot has been said and done surrounding Pokemon Go, about how it isn't a proper Pokemon game, and yet it's been downloaded 500 million times. Niantic are making a bit of a mess keeping the app updated, resulting in the active player base being a fraction of what it once was, and yet it's still outperforming every other app on the market in almost every area. Love it or hate it, you can't deny the impact that Pokemon Go has had on both the mobile market and for the Pokemon brand. It put Pokemon back in the spotlight in a way not seen for 2 decades, and it was mostly for good reasons, so frankly no harm done. On the contrary, Pokemon Go has helped to revitalise the franchise, reintroducing old fans to something that had long since been forgotten about, just in time for a new release for the series with a natural knock-on effect in sales. In the space of 1 week in July, Pokemon became incredibly relevant again, and regardless if this was intentional or not, it became the perfect platform on which to take Pokemon forward. This is sounding more and more like a political rally. Anyway, yeah, Pokemon Go was cool. If it wasn't such a unique set of circumstances, I'd say this should be some kind of template for reinvigorating any franchise somewhat forgotten by the masses. It got people buying 3DSs. That's some feat. When you think of what Pokemon as a series might struggle with if more games get made, it's hard to look past the elephant in the room that is making new Pokemon. I'm sure by this point there's enough minds working towards designing new Pokemon for new games that each title's roster doesn't resemble a closing gap to the bottom of the barrel, but the cold hard fact is that we've now got over 800 of the little bastards. If you did an updated version of the Pokerap while saying names at the same pace, you'd be there for roughly 16 minutes. Suddenly the idea of catching them all is a real challenge that takes a lot of effort and a buttload of trading. Will we reach 1,000 Pokemon at some point? Yeah, eventually, but it's worth noting that the rate at which new Pokemon have been added to the series has slowed down recently. Gen 5 added 156, but after that Gen 6 had barely half that. Gen 7 added 80 new ones, which is just enough to show off most of them in teaser trailers. What does this all mean then? Well, it means that Game Freak are reducing the number of new Pokemon added in every new generation, which I think is a sign that Game Freak are thinking more about the long term. I've heard a theory that says that Gen 4 was supposed to be the last generation, which I guess explains why there's a god Pokemon and why Gen 5 has so many new Pokemon. Maybe Game Freak had designs saved up for Gen 5 and that's why we got over 150. Now they can see a long-term future for the franchise, they've eased up a bit and aren't really in a rush to break the 1,000 mark. It's one thing having success with a franchise, but it's another knowing how to pace yourself when you get there. This ultimately is why I feel that Pokemon has plenty more to come. Obviously thinking up new designs each time won't be that easy, but with fewer Pokemon to focus on, the quality should be there. I don't think too many people care about the number of new Pokemon as long as they're good Pokemon. Though I gotta say, the prospect of catching 1,000 of these, we'll worry about it nearer the time. For now, we can bask in the warm glow that Pokemon has around itself nowadays. I said it at the start and I'll say it again. I can't think of another franchise which is in as good a position as Pokemon is right now. You think about the uncertainty surrounding a lot of other big names and the question marks about their short and long-term future, how to appease fans while making it accessible for new players. Pokemon has all the answers right now. You can't help but wonder what console it'll be on next and whether or not we could end up with a game on the Switch, as a continuation of the handheld main series or something else, but simply, Pokemon has never been in such a strong position before. Pokemon Go has done so much for the series, and if it's maintained properly, it could yet do more. With mobile games coming for Animal Crossing, Fire Emblem, and of course, Mario, Nintendo could yet reap similar awards with those franchises. Of course, a big successful release for the main series helps, and at that point, Sun and Moon are merely capitalizing on this new wave of fans. Give them some proper Pokemon to play, see how they like that. I'd love to tell you exactly why it's so good, but fucking comes out the day this video goes up. If you need me, you won't be able to find me.